I'm live. Okay. Man, that was brutal technical difficulties. I am so sorry to anyone who tried to get onto the live cast or live stream, I think, live stream. So, I, yeah, 10 minutes worth of frustrating technical difficulties, including sending to my phone the proof that I'm me. I am very sorry about that. So, what I want to do was talk about any of the questions that you might have about Ukraine at this point. Some of you put some questions into the community tab yesterday. Okay, somebody showed up and then just left. I'm going to try to pull up the community tab while we're seeing if anybody else joins us. YouTube backslash at Gerdes, and we'll see what happens here. I was trying to make it work in a much smoother way. My smoother way would have been where you could have seen me and seen this as well, and that just fell apart. I was using OBS Studio, which I'm very not used to. And so if you are here, say hello. One person came and left, two people came, and now we're back down to one. So if you're here, say hi, and I'll say hi back, and we'll get started and start answering questions because people will watch this in the review. And if you're in the review, just skip forward until until we can actually answer some questions. Okay, so I'm pulling up the community tab on a different screen, and I asked I was going to live stream, and I'll just start working through questions because that'll at least provide some value to people watching later. So the first question was, how would you sum up the key differences in types of leadership between Zelensky and Putin? And in a broader context, how some leaders get to the stage where they seem to want to hang on to power no matter what. I think that let me address the second line first. How some leaders get to the point where they want to hang on to power no matter what. Power is something that's really interesting. It is addictive. It has very similar to addictive kind of properties, and it doesn't take a lot of power for people to get high on it. And I mean, I see this with my 9-year-old telling my 6-year-old, well, I'm 9 and you're only 6. So, and you better do what I tell you to do. So there's that. It's just something inside humans that we just like to tell other people what to do. I don't understand exactly what it is, but I know it's there. It's a legitimate phenomenon. Greetings, Aaron. Thank you for attending. Okay, so the idea of power and Zelensky and Putin. Putin and Zelensky are diametrically opposed in their leadership approaches. They might, I mean, I don't know how much, I'm not in either man's heart, but when I watch, for example, the New Year's speech, and if you haven't seen that, go back to New Year's and see, I have a contrasting Zelensky versus Putin, and just go back and watch that. And the difference in speech, Putin was kind of saying the right things, but it rang hollow. It's like, and from our tables, we will raise a toast to you and your sacrifices and that kind of thing. And it's good to acknowledge those sacrifices, but it was just different in its tone, in its spirit, in its import than Zelensky's, who said we and our and us so many more times. In fact, Putin said we, our, and us only 48 times. Zelensky said it 97 times. And even the context was different because when Putin said our, it was just about our Russia, our Russia, our Russia, which from the way that I read Putin, and I don't have the corner of the market on truth, but the way that I read him is he identifies himself with the state, like Louis XIV, l'état c'est moi, I am the state. And so even when he uses our in that sense, he's talking about him, like go do this for me, and that's not cool. Zelensky is very focused on uniting. And again, you're uniting against Putin, yes, but you're uniting. And everywhere he's gone, he has unified the world. And so the difference between Zelensky and Putin is just it's night and day. Now, Putin's leadership is very similar to the kind of leadership that Russia has experienced for a long time. They're used to authoritarian leaders. Zelensky grew up under the collapse, or he grew up as the Soviet Union was collapsing, and he identifies with the West, and he has adopted a lot of Western mindsets. It's not purely there. About half of his his political agenda. And now this was before the war even began. I don't like because it kind of leans a little bit too much toward the East, but it's remarkably progressive, given where Ukraine has come from under Russian domination, under Soviet domination. And so Zelensky is actually has adopted a lot of Western mental models about leadership, and I think that's helped a lot. Arunis, thank you for joining us as well. I tried to say hi, but it just kept loading. I was telling people earlier. I see you in the chat. I was telling even I had so much technical trouble with this that even like YouTube was making me verify, and I'm like, come on, really? I'm already struggling to get this to go. Okay, so the next question, I'll answer your questions. Those of you who are in the chat, if you don't put questions in the chat, I'll just answer the questions that were posed yesterday. As I was saying, hey, I'm going to live stream on Friday, but I'll address you first if you're here live in the chat. So yeah, there's a world of difference between Zelensky and Putin in the way that they operate and the way they think about leadership. And remember, leadership is there's a couple of different interesting components to it. The first part about leadership is that the way that you think or see is the way that you act, and it's not just that you do these things, but you actually see people as people. Like, so if you start like I do with the premise in class that people are made in the image of God and they deserve to be respected, that leads you one direction. If you think that people are raw materials for Putin's use, then you go a whole different direction. So okay, Dave Penny, hello from Houston. Hello in Houston. I hope you're enjoying warm weather again after that cold snap that the entire country had. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next question. That was the difference between Zelensky and Putin. Octo Knight 64 said, I began to have one concern. As a Frenchman, I know how hard the reconciliation has been after World War II between collaborators and resistance, and every shade of gray in between. I began to see articles about teachers who were considered traitors because they continue to teach kids while under the occupation. Where's the limit, and how do they deal with this? Things can get very ugly rapidly, and this could tarnish Ukrainians' fight. We're all already seeing some ugliness. And it goes and pictures in Kherson. This will be will be an immense task if by any chance Ukraine is able to oust Russia from its currently occupied territories. And he goes on a little bit more. Okay, so I saw this too in the summer. I think it was about July, where teachers were being made teachers were being made like essentially you must teach or you will lose your job, or parents were being forced to put their children in schools in Russian curriculum, or they will lose their parental rights. I mean, that's the degree to which this is being done. I also saw articles from the Ukrainian government saying, look, we will not tolerate collaborators. However, we're going to look at this like if you're forced, this is all you like. You have no other recourse but to do this. We'll take that into consideration. But they will be prosecuting collaborators after the war. But I think they'll be looking at where you're like, sure, sign me up. I'm happy to be. You're going to make me the principal now, and I'll be in charge. You know, that's a different category than somebody. This is your only income, and you're taking care of your elderly grandmother, and you're her sole source of support. And that, I mean, they're different circumstances. So I think they'll take that into consideration, but it's probably going to be ugly. Okay, as I said, there's a handful of you in here now. What questions do you have? John Bowie, YouTube is having resource issues due to Russian bot attacks, so it might get chat errors occasionally. Wow, okay, that's new to me. I didn't know that that was actually going on, but it was very slow, and it I thought that I was just technically incompetent, which I probably am. I know a lot about my subject matter. I read a lot, but as far as making YouTube work with live stream, that was a different thing. But if you have questions, I'll address you first. And I've already addressed a couple of the questions that were out on here. What would happen if Russia? I'm sorry, John. This might be part of the problems that you were having. Yeah, it might have been. Um, Okay, and there was another question here of what would happen if Russia uses biological, chemical, or tactical nukes in Ukraine right now? Will the U.S. With the U.S. House of Representatives frozen? And so the concern is, I don't know how much you're paying attention to what's going on in the United States, but Kevin McCarthy can't seem to get himself elected as Speaker, even though he has a majority. Kevin McCarthy is a Trump um, a guy that Trump likes and is supported, and he's getting resistance from people that are both from the Trump camp and not from the Trump camp. And it's not about Ukraine. All of what's going on right now about the speaker's election has almost nothing to do with Ukraine. There is hardcore Trump supporters that don't like McCarthy, and there are people that are on Ukraine's side that don't like McCarthy. So I wouldn't worry about that as far as what's going on with the speaker's race in the United States and is the resistance to stop Ukraine or it's not that. They don't like McCarthy and they think that okay, so part of this is that the previous speaker Nancy Pelosi accumulated certain power to the speaker that was not there before, and they're trying to wrest it back to put it back into Congress rather than with the speaker. And that's what the fight is about right now. And they don't trust McCarthy, and there's kind of a reason they don't trust McCarthy. McCarthy's been in power for a long time, in power not just in Congress but in the power echelons within Congress, and so they don't trust him. They're not sure exactly how he would govern as speaker, and that's what's going on there. So I'd set that aside and put your mind at rest about that. If you want to hear something about how Republicans actually think and that kind of thing, when I was talking to a tippling philosopher, we had this conversation about the makeup of the Republican Party. So I don't want to. Get into that here unless somebody has this very targeted question. And there are 15 of you out there now. So if you have any specific questions, I'm willing to address them. But to get her, and I'll interrupt what I'm saying to these questions here. I'm almost done with these questions actually, and address you first. So the question was, what would happen if Russia does these things while the House of Representatives is frozen? Okay, so you're kind of on the right track in the sense that the House of Representatives is who declares war. But you're off track in a sense that you don't realize that the commander in chief, that's the president, has the authority to take action immediately if he needs to. He's the commander in chief. He has to go back to Congress to get a declaration of war officially within like 60 days or something like that. Okay, Arunas Gerses, I like your first statement. Putin tries to force this perspective that you are against him. You're against everything Russian, making it hard to separate criticism from Putin and Russophobia. Yes, that's right. And he keeps repeating. So he keeps repeating these propaganda statements as if he just keeps repeating it, it will become true. And that's the way that he thinks about things, and he's trying to get the world to see it from that perspective as well. And yeah, I don't think that's going to work. Arunas, your name looks Lithuanian. Is that Lithuanian? I've been to Lithuania 3 times. If it is, Labas. I know 2 words in Lithuanian. Labas. I've been there 3 times and I only know a couple of words. Labas and toiletas. And toiletas will get you a long way when you travel. Like learn how to say hello and learn how to say, "I need a toilet." So, okay. So I wouldn't worry about Labas. Yeah, Lithuania is a beautiful country. I love Vilnius. I was in a church that was like 700 years old, and the marble in the floor kind of went like that. And to an American, that's just amazing, because like our oldest buildings don't go back more than 400 years in, in the United States. So that was just like, wow, look at the history. Anyway, okay, so what would have happened to if the U.S. if Russia did something squirrely during this time? Not much. I mean, it's not. You don't have to worry about it. The commander in chief would have the first and final say for 60 days at least until Congress could decide, and they could decide to stop it, but they probably wouldn't. Okay, so let's talk about what's been happening. Hello, Denmark. Let's talk about what's been happening in the last day or two. So yesterday, Putin decides that he's going to unilaterally declare a Christmas truce. And I talked about that, and I said, like, I have mixed emotions. Do you really want? I mean, I like our guys to rest. At the same time, I don't want their guys to rest, and I really want to just punch them in the nose, even harder on Christmas, just because of all the horrible stuff. And I guess that's not very kind of me to be saying that, but I also don't want to give them an extra reason to show like we have to go to war now because of their how they're acting. And but I think Zelensky steered the correct course, and I talk about it in today's. I just shot today's video, and I'm going to put it up after this live stream. So I'm not going to spend a lot of it, but essentially, no, no, you're not. I mean, you're not going to do it. we're not stopping because we'll stop when you get out. And I think that's a pretty fair way of splitting the difference. And I go into that in some detail, so I'm not going to do that right now. This war has given me, Aaron says, this war has given me a huge appreciation for Eastern Europe and showed me how pathetic my public school history education was. Yeah, and honestly, we didn't focus a lot on Eastern Europe. I mean, if we were focusing on Europe, it was more Western, World War I and World War II, and that kind of thing. Hello, Thomas. Hello from Australia. Um, Okay, there's a number of you, a couple dozen. Tell me what questions I can answer for you because I ran out of the questions that were out here on the live stream about, what was going on, what their itching concerns were. So Dave Penny asks, how much moral responsibility do individual Russians hold for this war? That is a freaking great question. The way that it works, is that we're all responsible for our own country in a small degree. I mean, I'm responsible that we have Joe Biden here, even though I didn't vote for him, and as an American, and uh, because this is part of my culture, this is part of what I can contribute to. I'm responsible for what I'm saying. I'm responsible for every word that I utter here on this channel. And but the average Russian, yeah, so I was watching Mercatus Media yesterday. I don't tend to watch that a lot. He goes on for like a 3-hour live stream, and he shows a lot of like more graphic stuff, and he's a former soldier, so he can analyze some things. But he was showing these clips of average Russians, and they were showing them. They're like, "Hey, look at this on the cell phone," and they were showing them like here is bombed out buildings in Bakhmut, and they were like, "No, that can't be right. That seems like it's fake." Or that's very sad, but what can you do about it? And they have this kind of like beaten down kind of mentality. I noticed it when I was in the Soviet when I was in Lithuania the first time. I was in Lithuania in 2001. You only had your independence for 10 years. And my American friends that were there, we were at a conference in the Seimas, that's their parliament. My American friends, we dubbed this, in fact, I coined the term. I called it the Soviet hangover because there was just such a different mentality. And Lithuanians, as I went back in, over about 10 years, I went back a few times. And there was such a difference in the mentality over time. It got better and better, but the Soviet hangover was just like kind of like this. Well, what are you going to do about this? What could we actually do after all? And it's just really interesting. Like one of the things somebody said was, well, we just need one good leader to lead us. Like their president had some scandals, and we just need one. No, that I mean, to an American, we're like one good leader. What? But to a Russian, that makes total sense. And so the Russian mentality is very different, and they're just kind of like politically beaten down, like don't do anything politically because that's going to get you in trouble. I don't know if that helps or whatever, but that's how I perceive this. Okay, let's go. Good appreciation. Glory to Russia, says ML Harden. Ukraine is slowly shifting to Christmas on the 25th of December, so it's more moving from Russian now. Yeah, that's right. And that there was an intentional move to move to the 25th of December to join the Russians. I'm sorry, to join the Catholics and the Protestants in their celebration of Christmas date. And yeah, that was a very intentional poking in the eye to the Russian Orthodox Church. Um, Thomas Fowl, Austria, not Australia. I'm sorry. I was just trying to read while I was talking. ML Harden, why do you believe TPP called a ceasefire? I don't think it was a religious reasons. I don't think it was for religious reasons. I don't think he does anything for like people like to think that Putin's like this deeply orthodox whatever. Putin was an atheist in the KGB. He's not orthodox in any meaningful sense. Like he might have taken on the garb of that, or where he wears the cloak of that in order to have the uh, patriarch, shroud him with some kind of authority, like a czar. But I don't believe that he fundamentally is Christian in any meaningful way. That being said, I think he's also up to something, and I think that he wins either way. So if they get a ceasefire, they can move troops around and do things, get, rotate people in and out, ammunition in and out, do something, right? And if he doesn't, then I tried, but those Ukrainians, they're so mean. They kept coming. And I think that's what actually was happening there. Okay. Liberation game design. Would you expect a renewed offensive in Kherson, or do you think an offensive toward Melitopol? You mean from the? I'm assuming that you mean from the Ukrainians, not from the, not from the Russians trying to take Kherson back. Um, yes, I've predicted, and again, my crystal ball is terrible. I try to only stick to what is provable and triangulate on the news and that kind of thing. But my gut tells me that they're going to try to somehow split the middle and then move up and down. I don't know if they'll move up or down or up and down, but toward Melitopol would be, if I was a betting man, that's what I would bet. And what they're going to try to do, and they just announced this 2 days ago. Like, why would the head of the intelligence say this unless they were trying to signal to the Russians, like, you better spread out your line? What they're going to do is try to spread out the line to make it as thin as possible. And they said they're going to have this massive offensive in March, going from Crimea all the way to Donbass. And they, I think, did that intentionally so that it thins it out rather than concentrates in certain areas. The more ground they take, the more the Russians can concentrate. And so taking the northwestern side of Kherson was actually good and bad. It was good they got the ground back. I'm glad I got those people are liberated. That's awesome. But it was good to kind of have pinned them down and make the Russians nervous about where they need to be. Whereas now that they're across the river, it's actually a different thing. Like, they're a lot safer across the river than they were when they were in the northwest bank of Kherson. Okay. I hope I answered your question. Next question. That clip on Mercado was from 1420 channel. I highly recommend subscribing. Well, thanks for the. I appreciate when you guys tell me about these things, because I've seen some things that I would not have seen otherwise, and we're all learning together. So thank you very much. I'll be looking up 1420 later. Uh, ML Harden says, one good leader to lead us. Sounds like shades of Reagan. No, one good leader to lead us. I think it was Eisenhower who said something like, we're in trouble when there's one leader and 135 million followers, which was what the population of the United States was at the time. I could have the numbers wrong, but it was something like that. And yeah, that's not how we are. We we have to have leadership, scaffolded leadership all the way through. I mean, even our system creates that, how good the leaders are, whether, so you have the president, and then you have Congress, and you split Congress and you have leadership there, and then you have all the state governors, and then you have all the mayors. Like, so you have scaffolded leadership all the way through, and that's intentional. Okay. Or Zelensky, let's see. The head of the Russian church is or was also KGB. Yeah, that's correct. He has some deep ties. I saw a picture of him wearing like a $30,000 Rolex. I think Jake Bro showed that, and then they tried to edit it out, but they edited it out and then had a reflection on the table where you still saw the Rolex. It's pretty funny. Let's see. Mitch Asdown, one not bad leader may be more important than one good one. Yeah, I mean, I'd take a not bad one there. And so that leads to an interesting question, like, what is going to happen in Russia post Putin? I was reading something this morning, and this is a perennial favorite, where it's talking about, does Putin have cancer? I mean, I don't know, and I wasn't going to put it up because it's speculative. The person says, well, we have a real source and real human intelligence. I'm not going to show that until it's really confirmable. um, some people are trying to be the first out with the first information. I'm not. I'm trying to be the most accurate, and so I wasn't going to put that out. But so let's say Putin is gone. Who fills the void? Everybody that I see that is part of his, like, so there's Putin, and then there's kind of his team of people that are important people, and then there's the population, right? Everybody that I am aware of in his team of important people are terrible replacements that are going to be not much better, if any better, than Putin. So I don't know yet from that I know, and I don't know about everyone exactly, but I don't know. And there's something in the Russian psyche that's just leans authoritarian, and so it makes me nervous. Okay, not one bad leader, but one more important. One not bad leader, maybe more important than one good one. I agree. Um, absolutely. The patriarch was also in the KGB. Yeah, we know that. John Bowie, yes. 1420 is a great channel for insights. Liberation game design. Yes, I meant the Ukrainian side is the Russian side still holds Melitopol, of course. My girlfriend is from Kherson, so we follow the war accurately, actively. I would imagine that you would. I'm not Ukrainian. I don't. I mean, I've never had any like real thought about. I've met a few Ukrainians over time, and they were like immensely proud. And I always wondered, like, why are you so proud? Ukrainians, you have every right to be proud now. I'm now a believer. You have no doubt in my mind. You have every reason to be proud. You have shown yourself well. You have acquitted yourself well. Um, and okay, so her family is there from there as well. We hope her family's okay. Liberation game design, sort of. Yes, most managed to flee and live with us in the Netherlands until recently when they got their own place. So there's some family there. What will it take for Russians to finally change? Wow. Um, I think the only thing that comes to my mind is something like an all-out defeat, but all-out defeat is significant. So I'm watching Vlad Vexler. This is what I do for fun, right? I mean, when I'm not doing this part or doing my own job, like at night, I'm watching these other channels to get other insights from other folks. Vlad said something yesterday that was very interesting and very scary, and that is that there's I believe that Putin will. This is me. I believe that Putin will close the borders in just a matter of time and declare mobilization. I'm not alone. Vlad was saying, yeah, he very well might in time. And inside Russia was saying, yeah, it's coming. It's right around the corner. And here's why I see it that way. I believe that he's going to close the borders and declare this mobilization. So, but Vlad said, like Putin doesn't mind spending the human lives, and he's in 2022 he spent. Let's use the Ukrainian numbers, 100,000 Russian lives he spent, and he's willing to spend what 500,000 Ukraine, not Ukrainian, well Ukrainian too. He's willing to spend 500,000 Russian lives so that he can win this war. That means 5 years, all of their things being equal. And like Putin's not stopping. And I think there's something very scary about that. I think before you get to 5 years, the Russian economy, the Russian political system will be just buckling under the pressure before you can get to that. But yeah, I think that you have to beat Putin on the battlefield and get a white flag. I'm saying, Uncle, I give up, so that you can impose what was imposed on Germany and Japan after World War II. That sorry, we're not doing this anymore. We're gonna start over, right? Japan has come out of that very strong. Germany's come out of that very strong. Even I mean, they had to carve up East and West and whatever because of the Allies. But what America did with Japan, I mean, they got them back on their feet very quickly and made it work. But I think you have to get something out of the culture, out of the psyche, out of the political system. The way leadership works there is dysfunctional. Like dysfunctional as the day is long. Like there's a like a the higher you go, the more you can treat people terribly, and we got to get that out of their system first. And I don't know, and it'll trickle down into the common person who's just apathetic. So I don't really have an answer for you, but that's the best I can come to. Mr. Man, oh, you started already. I just posted a few questions under the community post you put up yesterday. If you want to read them, okay. Well, let's see if I can uh, refresh that community post, and I'll see what you got. I'm slow, but Mariupol has that partisan thing, so the city itself can be taken. Is it talking about Mariupol or Melitopol? I would think means skirting, as it would take too long to actively take the city. Yeah, they might. I mean, they're going in. I would project that they would go into the city. I am not, I have 2 years of Army ROTC under my belt. That's my military expertise. And I read a lot about military leadership because it's a weird thing, but I'm a business professor, a business management professor, right? And business people read military to get outside views. Military read business to get outside views. It's a very strange thing, the way that that works. But so I've read a lot, but I don't have any active strategic insight into the battlefield, but it makes sense to me to cut in the middle. And I don't know whether to take the city or not. That's for somebody above my pay grade militarily. Um, okay, so let me go back to Mr. Mann. Did you post something here? I don't see your post. So if you can just cut and paste your post into here, Mr. Mann, I'll try to answer your questions. Uh, Octonite Vlad Vexler has the best channel on Russian psyche. Yes, he has great insights into the Russian psyche. But I also, um, yeah, this isn't Russian psyche, but Ukrainian psyche is also very interesting as well, because the Ukrainian psyche is very Western leaning, very Western in orientation and the things that they hope to be. And I think that that's part of the problem. So when Putin says that Ukraine is a threat, they're a threat because culturally they're so different that they give it a contrast. In the same way that you see like North and South Korea are a contrast. You want to see something hilarious? Google North and South Korea at night, and you'll see like North Korea is almost completely black, and South Korea is bright and shiny. Well, it's the same kind of thing. Like what Ukraine is going to become such a contrast piece that that is more dangerous to Russia than anything militarily that Ukraine could have or couldn't have done. Okay, Vlad, absolutely right. Also, Mariupol just plain earned it. I'm not sure what we're talking about. Legacy is a big thing to Putin. That's right. He sees himself as Peter the Great and Lenin and Putin. Like that's what he sees. Like he's going to be the big restorer, the big builder. And they always talk about this idea of like restoring their former lands. And so that would, if I was Finnish, that would make me very nervous. Or if I was Polish, that would make me very nervous, right? Because restoring former lands, if you had once been part of that real estate, you're in forever. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but that's the way that Putin seems to think. Okay. Um, where was I? Taking the city logistics is business management. It's going to be a massive issue when they want to retake Melitopol, but also Donetsk and Luhansk. Yeah, it will be. But I think so. Let's go back to that. If I were the Ukrainians, I would isolate them and then just sort of keep them from getting anywhere and keep them from getting resupplied, and then it'll become less of an issue over time. But yeah, if you have time, I highly recommend listening to Dr. Timothy Snyder's Yale lectures on Ukraine from last semester, free on YouTube. I did see some of them, and he did a pretty good job with that. Liberation game design might have been asked or mentioned before, but have you been in Ukraine or Russia? If so, what was your experience there? No, I have not been in either country. I've been to Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, and Belarus. So I can tell you about my experience in Belarus. And this was a teaching trip, and it was creepy. I know we were being watched. Prostitutes called our room and asked if I would like a girl. No, the answer was no. And it was just weird because, like, if you're in a major city anywhere in the world, uh, it's just it was all too quiet. Like the only crime that the Belarusians would permit is organized crime. So the way I described it to friends afterwards was like if you have a deck of playing cards, a normal place would have like a three of crime, a 10 of this, a seven of that, a five of this. And it's like they reshuffled the deck and then like had different denominations or different levels of things that I don't know how to describe it better than that. But like one of the nicest buildings was the labor union building. like they're still like kind of Soviet in mentality. I talked to a businessman there who told me that um, he was his official tax rate was more than 100%, which meant that you just have to give bribes if you want to stay in business. And it's just like, how do you function in that kind of environment? So I have been in there. So being in a few Eastern European countries, I have some sense of the culture, but I've not been to Russia. I have not been to Ukraine. I'd like to get to Ukraine, but I've not been there. Uh, let's see here. Might have been asked or mentioned before. What was my experience there? Octonite for sure, but strongly local. Okay, you actually indirectly answered all of my questions already. Someone posted a really similar one, so thank you for the answer. I do what I can. Logistics can cause you to win or lose. Absolutely, logistics can cause you to win or lose, and that's what's going on with the Russians right now. They're losing on logistics. I mean, it's terrible. And the Ukrainians, to their credit, are crazy smart, crazy innovative. They have done some just militarily and technologically clever things. So I've got a hand. It's not that it's just the Russians making errors, although they are. The Ukrainians are actually doing some very creative things militarily as well. Yes, but locals with pitchforks. I'm not sure what that was. That's my weapon of choice. What was it about the Russian culture that it appears that they value life a little less than other countries? I'm basing this on somewhat on broad support Putin has within his country. So let me. I'm not sure what you're saying with the second part, but the first part that they value life differently. So collectivist cultures tend to do this as a generalization, but then you look at what Stalin did to his people and killing, 25 to 40,000 in some kind of estimates, a million or 25 to 40 million of his own people. You look at the way that they fight wars; they just keep sending people into the slaughter, so they'll eventually overwhelm them. During World War II, they actually put sharpshooters behind the lines, so the troops went up, and if they came back, you'll be shot if you come back. So keep going forward. I mean, that's it's hard to fathom or to think through that in a culture in the U.S. We value life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? We value human life. I'd rather lose lots of equipment than lose one human life. We value that. So they don't put that same premium on life, and it shows in the way that they fight. And so that's what that's about. I'm not sure about the second part, but I'll try to answer that if I can. The new Ivan the Terrible, not Peter. Yeah, sure, Ivan the Terrible. Maybe Dracula. I mean, I'm fine with any of those. It also appears that average folks still put motherland ahead of their own children. Yeah, and that's part of the collective culture as well within the country. I think I know more about the geography of Ukraine than any other country in the world. Yeah, I'm telling you, I that's a great quote because I moved to the state where I live about 12 years ago, and I know more about the geography of Ukraine than I do about the rest of the state. Like I know my own local area, and I've traveled to some other parts of it, but I know more about the layout of Ukraine than I do about my own state in the U.S. Uh, what, if anything, should Ukraine be willing to give up in exchange for lasting peace? Well, since you said lasting peace, nothing. In exchange for peace, they might consider some land deals, but in exchange for lasting peace, until the Russians just submit and say "Uncle," they're not going to have lasting peace because the look. I've said this before, but when I was a kid, I remember seeing a kid that an older brother of a friend who had a bloody nose and kind of a black eye, and I said, "Whoa, what happened?" And he said, "Well, so and so wanted to fight, and I didn't, so we fought." That's the way the world works. So if Russia just keeps wanting to fight, just keeps wanting to reunite, they say that without Ukraine, Russia is just a country. With Ukraine, Russia is an empire. As long as Russia has that mentality, they're just going to keep fighting, and that's the reality of it. Um, Okay, what if anything should Ukraine do for lasting peace? Nothing. They have to win. I mean, if they're going to have lasting peace, they have to win. That's the reality of it, and force them to the pre 1991 borders, and show that this can't happen again. Now, a bully picks on somebody that he thinks he can beat easily, right? That's what Putin did. Putin had terrible data because as a dictator, people are always saying, "Yes, boss, you're so smart, you're wonderful," and didn't really work out so well, did it? So he had faulty information going into this, thought that they would be met with roses. And as Anna from Ukraine, and by the way, watch Anna from Ukraine's channel; it's good stuff. As Anna said, they came with roses for their graves, which is a little dark, but that's the way that they saw it. So if a bully can't take you, they're much less likely to come back again if they have been made to be beaten, right? So that's what it has to be, and they won't abide. Look, I mean, in the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, the U.S., UK, and Russia were the guarantors of Ukrainian borders, and Russia's the one doing it. So if they won't respect that, I mean, okay, so you understand my drift. What if anything? Okay. Do we have any kind of timeline as to when the Russian military munitions will be depleted to the point that they can't fight? So I talked about this the other day with the Shahed drones, right? Um, and it's a good question with missiles. I haven't seen something. ISW keeps saying they're depleting their stock. They're depleting their stock. Maybe they can get some from somewhere. I don't know. But the Shaheds, for example, there's like 1,750 of them were sold from Iran to Russia. They've they've spent 660 of them, and I did the math the other day. So they have to swarm. They can't just send 10 drones at a time because they get shot down. They're kind of slow and lumbering, right? So they have to swarm and they have to send, let's say, 50 at a time. But if you send 50 at a time, now you only have about 25 more attempts before you're completely out of those Shahed drones. And then they have to come up with a new strategy. So I'm sure the military folks in Russia are trying to figure out, like, how long can we make this last? What else can we do? How else, right? Because they're going to run out eventually. And eventually means that there's going to be more damage because you had essentially a dozen waves of these missile drone attacks, like huge, like I'm talking about 80 or 100 at a time, something like that, to overwhelm the system, because that's what they have to do. They have to overwhelm the systems. But I mean, they're having some significant success. As of 2 days ago, they shot down 86 out of, or 84 out of 84 Shahed drones. So they're continuing to degrade themselves in what they actually have, where the West keeps pouring stuff in, but there's not. I mean, who are you going to pour it in from? North Korea? I mean, how long can that last? From Iran? How long can that really last? I don't know. It's not the same thing. So I don't know the definitive answer, but it's not looking good. Vlad the Terrible. Yeah, I've actually used that term. I've called them that before. In my opinion, Russia has to lose all territory in Ukraine, else they'll come again later. That's exactly right. If they keep, example, Donbass, they will be back since it didn't work out for them. They got something. That's right. So Kissinger is wrong. And Henry Kissinger was talking about, by the way, thank you. I'm to the last comment. If anybody has any other questions, um, please feel free to put that in the chat and we can keep going. Henry Kissinger in the summer, in about July, said, well, what we need to do is go back to before the war and just go back to exactly where everybody was, and it have peace right now. And that's terrible because that's exactly what he's going to do. Rest up and try again. And, I floated the idea, like, Zelensky should be saying, nope, you try to take four of our borders. Part of the peace deal is we get four of your borders, four of our oblasts. We get four of your oblasts. So we're going to take this whole south side so that you can't even be anywhere in the Black Sea. And now I'm not saying that he should actually get that. I'm saying that should be his negotiation tactic in order to say, like, you're going to lose something here. You're not, I mean, this is, you can have them back after you've paid for all the reparations plus some, or something along those lines. But it's either all the negotiation stuff that I've talked about, Ukraine either gets back to square one or loses something. I mean, Russia's not losing anything here, and that's what's bizarre here. Okay, next comments. Russia has to lose Volgograd and the Don as a border, but Ukraine does not want that territory. Yeah, I mean, maybe they don't. I'm just saying, like, it's not. It's the game is stacked against Ukraine. I'm not actually saying, like, you have to do this, but they need to have some kind of concession that, like, for example, Germany has agreed to this. The U.S. is thinking about it. The UK is thinking about it, about seizing oligarchs' assets and using that to pay back. Okay, that's a step. But I say, as soon as the peace is, the truce is declared, white flag, we give up. As soon as that happens, best step is okay. Your Russian oil money is now earmarked directly for, or your natural gas is earmarked directly to rebuild Ukraine until everything is rebuilt to modern standards. And that's really what needs to go. You can't expect the West to do a Marshall Plan after. I mean, I'm not saying that the U.S. shouldn't be part of this, but I mean, really, the people that did the crime need to do the time, right? So Russia needs to be made to pay for this, and that'll make them a little less antsy later on. Russia's, let's see, where was I? I agree with Mitch. Probably there are too many Russians there. Yeah, and I'm not trying to tick off the people or anything. That's not the point. The longer this goes on, the worse I think it's going to be for Russia as far as economically and politically potentially imploding as well. And that makes me really nervous because if that scenario happens, if they're not just made to wave a white flag and say uncle, and they can, if they do that, they can get their kids back. The kids that have been imported across the border, and you can, have international agencies monitor this and that kind of thing. But if it just implodes and becomes, factional warlords fighting, you're not getting those kids back. That's going to be really tricky, and that's, to my mind, a much higher priority than just the destruction of Russia. Russia has to lose. We'll go. Okay, Russia is starting to become restricted by its ability to make artillery shells. So that's exactly right, and I've seen articles about that. Do you think McCarthy will support Ukraine? I don't think he'll be antagonistic to it. I think he said this blank check thing. I talked about this when he first said the blank check statement. Excuse me, my throat. We made that comment that day. I talked about it like, look, he's trying to, in politics, you have to say, my opponent is this, but I'm that. And he had to make a differentiation between himself, and he was using that. But I don't think that he's antagonistic toward it. I don't think he's a great friend of Ukraine, but I don't think he's an enemy. I think there's also enough conservative. So within the Republican Party, there's a conservative wing and there's a populist wing, and there's enough Reagan conservatives like me that we look at this and go like, well, what would Reagan do? I mean, and the answer is very clear. And so I don't think that he'll be a problem. And Ukraine's been essentially funded for the next year anyway, so I wouldn't worry about that. And if it all went wrong, you still have Lend-Lease in place where you have the option to use the Lend-Lease through the power of the president for another following year until the next election cycle. So I'm not worried about support for Ukraine. Okay. Let's see. Agree with Mitch. Russians starting to become restricted. Do you think McCarthy will support? Okay, that is Azov and Kazakh land. Or I'm not sure what we're talking about, Mitch, with Azov and Kazakh land. Are you talking about Belgorod? True, the gas fields are the key to all. No doubt it counts for Russia. Drifting Cowboy. Where were you? It just moved on me. Drifting Cowboy. Do you think Russia is only driven out of Ukraine? They will restock and come again. Shouldn't we want regime change? Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I want regime change in the sense that I don't think Putin will change, even if he's beaten. I don't think he'll be like, oh well, I was beaten, now I see the light. I don't think it's like that. But he'll have to be forced into certain concessions because he wouldn't respect other agreements. So you need to really push on that. You can't just like sign the document. Okay, everything's great. I mean, he didn't respect the other agreements before. So yes, but I don't know that I would necessarily require that. I would necessarily require a lot of pain and replenishing of Ukraine that is part of the package of restricting. Like, look what happened to Japan after World War II. Their military was deeply restricted. That made them somewhat pacifist for a generation, and that took some of the fire out. Same with Germany. If Germany wants to has been leaning pacifist, I appreciate that. I mean, they started 2 world wars from my perspective, right? And so that has taken some of the fire out. They play nice with the rest of Europe a lot more right now. So something like that, culturally, politically, restrictively. But I don't know that that means that Putin, who is democratically elected, has to go necessarily. I don't like him there, and if that cancer thing was right, maybe he won't be all that long. But it has to really pin him down. It can't give him any wiggle room. Liberation Game. Do you think that Ukraine should have kept some of their atomic bombs in the 1990s, as the promise was given to them that keep Ukraine protected? Yeah. So that's really a crazy important point. Um, I oh, man, that's tough. Okay, so here's what's happened. The lesson to the rest of the world has been, if you don't have these nuclear weapons, then this can happen to you. So I need to get my hands on some, which is the wrong lesson to draw from this. It's just that we should have. So honestly, we should have stopped this in 2014 when it first started, and there was no political will to do it. And as soon as the borders were overrun by the Russians, but remember, so Putin did this in 2008, and he wasn't stopped then. And so, hey, nobody stopped me in Georgia. That was a mistake. I said it was a mistake at the time. I'm not on video saying it was a mistake, so I can't prove it. But I remember that and like, what's going on? So that was George W. Bush's mistake. And then 2014 was Obama's mistake. Like, you should have been doing something about this, and they didn't do it. And so it only snowballs. I said, when I was talking to a tippling philosopher, I said, the goal needs to be to prevent Putin from becoming Hitler. Hitler, I did my master's thesis on the Third Reich. It was the process where you could legally make a person a non-person and then kill them, right? Hitler actually said that if he was stopped, I think it was in the Sudetenland, that he would have stopped. Like, if he had been checked early on, he wouldn't have kept going. And I think that's what's happened with Putin. He's got more and more of an appetite. Um, where I live, there are alligators, and you can't feed an alligator. If you feed an alligator, you have to kill them because they will keep coming because they get used to humans being too close to humans and associating with them with food. So, okay. Do you think the Ukraine should have kept their nukes? I live in Cambodia. Wow, Cambodia. And I've been for 23 years. Despite the history here, I rarely see any guns. They have a buyback, and people are sick of war when it ended. Yeah, I can imagine after the Khmer Rouge that it was pretty ugly. Demilitarized zone like Korea. Paul, are you talking about the demilitarized zone being Ukraine or something? Oh, that would be interesting. A demilitarized zone around in those oblasts, the every oblast that rims Ukraine. That would be an interesting concession to make. The Don, North Azov, Sea of Azov, Cossacks, where there are more. Yeah, I mean, around that area, that's particularly where. And the Ukrainians could make the argument, just like Russians can, that you have Ukrainian uh, cousins right over the border. That should be ours. Like, just apply the logic. I'm not saying that you should do it. I'm just saying apply the same logic. And then, so very often, you can tell if something is true or false just by applying the same logic to the same thing the other way. And if it doesn't ring true, then there's probably something going on here. Um, Morgan, the U.S. alone could spend far more than Russia can handle at any speed necessary. That's exactly right. They can, and they spent 6% of their military budget in 2022. That's before the 45 billion that they just passed. But they spent 6% of their military budget, and Russia, who was like this, China's here, Russia's here, and Russia has been just plummeting. Now Ukraine simultaneously, if this is Russia, Ukraine is plummeting faster, but they're then being propped up, right? They're being propped up by the West. So, but yeah, Russia is hurting themselves while they're trying to hurt Ukraine. Who can or will replace Putin? So there's a handful of oligarch types. Now, the oligarchs, okay, Putin's cast of characters, the people that are next tier, are not necessarily the most competent. They are the people that Putin trusts, like that have been like a judo partner or a friend of his for years, or somebody that like Sergei Shoigu, who's the head of the military, is not really a deep military genius. He just happens to be somebody that Putin trusts. He's not that sharp. And so you have a lot of that kind of thing. And look, I'm a business management professor. I talk about this in a business context all the time. When the boss has yes men, they do his bidding rather than do what's right for the organization and the mission of the organization and that kind of thing. It's the same stuff. It's the exact same stuff. So yeah, that's where it is. Okay, next. Ukraine could do that. The demilitarized strip. Ukraine will not beat Russia to the point Germany or Japan were, though. They still will have nukes. That's correct, but they have to be brought to the place where they admit defeat on the battlefield and they have to sign whatever. That's what you need in order to get other concessions later on down the line. And again, you can't. It's almost like culture. You can't see culture. You feel culture. You understand culture. But what's happening politically and economically in Russia right now, it's kind of like it's unseen, but it's getting wobblier. Not to the point that it's going to collapse. I'm not predicting that anytime soon, but it's really starting to shake, and I think they're going to have to make some significant concessions before long. But actually, as I think about it, I wonder a scenario could be that they just pull out, they declare victory somehow and just pull out, but they can't do that. They're kind of caught in a, what a Chinese finger trap is. It's this little tube on one end and a tube on the other, and you put your fingers in it, and when you pull back, the tube expands, so you're kind of caught. Putin's kind of in a Chinese finger trap where now that he's added these four oblasts, he can't really just say, I declared victory, I've cleansed them, and now we're leaving, because now he can't leave these four oblasts. So he's really kind of stuck. Ukraine could do that. Ukraine could do demilitarize, appeasing bullies only emboldens them. Absolutely, Aaron. You couldn't be more right. John, Georgia was a little different, though. We hadn't given our word to protect them like we did Ukraine. That's right, but we didn't. We could have marshaled a international coalition to keep a balance of power. Napoleon, the Napoleonic Wars were a balance of power kind of war, and keeping a balance of power is good. It keeps bullies from becoming bigger bullies. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Yes, in harsh jail terms, if you're found with the gun only, okay, we're talking about Cambodia still. The annexation was a terrible strategic mistake. Yes, it was. It was absolutely a terrible strategic mistake, because now he can't. There's no way he can declare victory and get out and still keep his name. So now he has to win. And if he has to win and he's willing to expend 500,000 men or more in order to win, he's willing to kill them in order for him to stay in power. That's terrible. I mean, that's absolutely terrible leadership. Annexation was a terrible strategic mistake. I think Hitler said that about the Rhineland. Was it about the Rhineland? If I recall correctly, the German soldiers sent in to remilitarize the Rhineland didn't even have ammunition. Yeah, and Poland was a pretext, right? So what happened in Poland was that these Germans are being, and this is what got me fired up initially. Hitler used a pretext with Poland of that the Germans were being oppressed by these Poles, and they had to go in and take care of them. And then so they staged this thing that Poles had killed these people and took pictures about it, and they used that for propaganda. Sounds kind of familiar. I mean, Putin was out of Hitler's playbook. Now, with that, you also see that I put up on Facebook a picture of, and you can look this up. Put Putin, Hitler on a train reflection, and there's Putin sitting on a train like this, and then in the reflection in the mirror is Hitler like this, and it's just like, it's kind of eerie. And at the time, this was back in February. I believe we weren't quite to March yet, but I got a lot of heat up for that on Facebook. Like, that's not fair. You don't understand. No, I do understand. I did my master's thesis on the Third Reich, and they're not the same. No, they're not the same. But the principles, the tactics that they use were very much the same. So it's not that Russian doctrine is the same as Nazi doctrine, but the tactics that they used. Okay, I'm belaboring that. Worst thing in Russia is to lose face, and that's why he can't get out. He can't lose face. Um, yep. Do you think new economic sanctions will have an influence on the war? I'm not a yes, but marginally. So I'm not a big fan of economic sanctions. I don't. I think people people who don't understand the way that these guys think or work, I think that economic sanctions are the answer. They're not. You have to win this on the battlefield, but they can help degrade. If you're using them to help degrade the enemy, that's one thing. If you're using that like, well, we've sanctioned them, like it doesn't work without the military to kind of win friends and influence people too. Okay. Um, According to Peter Zinn, all of the weapons that the United States has given Ukraine were all slated for decommissioning and destruction and would be have cost us 3 times the money to dispose. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but we have given like second and third generation things, and that would be helpful to them. Like Zelensky keeps coming back with a wish list, and we're going, okay, so what can we give them? Now, somebody tippling philosopher and I got into this conversation a little bit about so um, why didn't we just give them all the weapons that they needed up front? Are we just trying to destroy Russia? Or, well, think about this. What if you gave them a bunch of weapons and then they lost right away? That wouldn't have worked out very well. Like then you have all these U.S. weapons seized by the Russians, and that would have been a bad thing. But what we did do was like, okay, here, use this, and then they use them like to great effect, and like, okay, here's some more, and they use it to even better effect. Here's some more, and so they've the U.S. has had to be very measured with what they can give and where, and so. But we're getting to the place where we're working very much like partners now. France is going to give AMXRC because we get new vehicles. Okay. And Ukraine has just gotten Bradley, or they're about to get Bradley fighting vehicles and some German armored vehicles and a bunch of other stuff as well. So they'll have more preparing for the future days. Okay. It is now 1:13. So we're at about an hour after my after my all my technical difficulties earlier on. Any final questions? I'll be happy to answer, and then we're going to wrap up. And thank you for your interest, and thank you for caring about what's going on. I deeply appreciate it, and I deeply appreciate learning from you all as well, and getting your feedback directly, because I'm growing as you're growing. Okay. Uh, Last questions. I'll give you 30 seconds as I am winding down now. And thank you for the 20 some odd of you that have stuck around. Maybe some people came and went, but there have been a handful of you that have been here the whole time, and I deeply appreciate that. Okay, thank you, Professor. You're welcome. Happy to talk about it. All right, if there's no other questions, I'll say goodbye. Thank you. I'll be back with another. Thank you. I'll be back with another video for today, talking about the Christmas truce. I already recorded it, and I will be putting it up after I'm done with this. Octonite said, I believe that we will need to talk about reconciliation with liberated Ukrainians, which will have collaborate. Yeah, that's going to be tricky. And maybe a South African model could work there. I don't know. But yeah, that's going to be pretty terrible, trying to work through that. For the world, I want policing action to be the thing. I'm not sure I understand that, Mitch. If you can clarify. Thanks and God bless. Thank you. Thank you. I agree. Octonite. That's correct. And Mitch, if you can quickly clarify, I'll try to answer that as our last question. So your comment was, for the world, I want policing action to be the thing. The world needs a functional UN with teeth. Yeah, I mean, the UN can. So I'm of two minds of that. I don't know how much I want the UN to do that, but at the same time, the UN can't do anything but declare. But when they declare the sense of the world nonetheless, and that actually just that is a significant step forward over not being able to figure out what the sense of the world is. Has to be UN with weapons humanity has. Yeah, I so you know what's real? I know I said I was about to go, but NATO really has disappointed me. And this is why NATO kept talking in the early days about, well, if you set foot on NATO territory, Article 5. Really? NATO was formed to stop the expansion of Soviet aggression. So it wasn't just to protect those within NATO. It was to stop anyone from rolling back to the degree that they could. That was the mentality, and yet they didn't do it. And the only reason that Ukraine was attacked was because it wasn't part of NATO. So, all right, well, I'm now getting up on my soapbox, and I'm going to stop that. All right, thank you guys. Thank you for watching, and I appreciate your comments and your thoughts. And thank you. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.